Right. So today we're going deep on a topic that's pretty crucial for understanding how the world works.
That really is.
Especially, for those of you out there who are UPSC aspirants and tackling international relations,
Definitely.
we are going to be dissecting a text on feminism, gender, and global politics.
Okay.
Not just the concepts, but
Right.
how they actually play out on the world stage.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing definitions for an exam. It's about equipping yourself with the knowledge to actually analyze
Exactly.
real-world situations. And I think this text is like a toolbox filled with different lenses to view those situations through.
So it's like getting a crash course in feminist theory then.
More like a guided tour through the evolution of
Okay.
feminist thought.
Okay.
And quite a fascinating one at that.
Right.
The text starts by breaking down feminist history into waves,
Okay.
which is a handy way to understand how the movement has evolved over time.
Okay. I remember learning about the waves in school, but it always felt a bit like memorizing dates and names.
Sure.
What's the real takeaway for someone trying to understand,
All right.
say, international conflicts or human rights issues?
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Each wave represents a shift in focus,
Okay.
a broadening of the feminist agenda.
Okay.
The first wave, back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, was all about suffrage, the right to vote.
Right. The idea being that, if women could vote, they could influence policies that impacted their lives.
Exactly.
So it was about gaining that basic political power.
Exactly. And, even before the term feminism was widely used, you had these incredible figures like Christine de Pizan advocating for women's education and political influence back in the 14th and 15th centuries.
Oh.
She wrote this amazing book called The Book of the City of Ladies, where she basically built this metaphorical city where women's intellect and contributions were celebrated. Imagine that way back then.
So the seeds were planted long ago, but the fight for equality obviously didn't end with suffrage.
Of course not.
The text then dives into the second wave.
Yes.
Which I remember being linked to the social movements of the 60s and 70s, right?
Yes. The second wave was about going beyond just political rights to address the systemic inequalities embedded in society itself. It was fueled by the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, all these forces demanding social justice.
Right.
And it brought to the forefront this powerful idea that the personal is political.
Okay.
What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah.
Well, think about issues like domestic violence or access to reproductive health care. These were suddenly being recognized as political issues, not just private matters.
So the second wave was about connecting those personal struggles to larger systems of power.
Exactly. And it's here that we see the rise of radical feminism, which argues that patriarchy, the system that privileges men over women, is at the root of these problems. They were calling for a complete overhaul of society, not just tweaking a few laws here and there.
And how did this radical feminist thought translate into action? On a global scale, did it influence policies or international organizations?
It absolutely did. It led to the creation of women's shelters. The push for equal pay and greater awareness of gender-based violence. On an international level, it fueled movements for women's rights in developing countries and challenged traditional power structures within international organizations like the UN.
So these waves weren't just abstract concepts. They had real-world consequences.
Absolutely.
This is starting to feel less like a history lesson and more like a playbook for understanding how social change happens.
I like that. And the story doesn't end there. The text then delves into a key debate that arose within feminist thought, equality versus difference. It's a fascinating tension that has shaped feminist strategies and goals.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the crux of this debate?
Well, on one hand, you have equality feminism, which, as the name suggests, emphasizes the importance of achieving equality between men and women. They believe that women should have the same rights, opportunities, and access to resources as men.
And I'm guessing liberal feminism is a big part of this approach.
Absolutely. Think of iconic figures like Simone de Beauvoir, who famously wrote, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." Liberal feminists focus on legal and political equality, fighting for things like equal pay, access to education and reproductive rights. They argue that removing legal barriers and ensuring equal opportunities is the key to achieving gender justice.
So it's about leveling the playing field so women can compete on equal footing with men.
That's a great way to put it, but then you have difference feminism, which adds a layer of complexity. It's not that they disagree with the goal of equality, but they approach it differently.
How so?
Difference feminism argues that focusing solely on being equal to men might lead women to deny or downplay their unique qualities and experiences. They suggest that women's historical and social experiences have given them a distinct perspective, a different way of viewing the world.
So it's not about erasing those differences, but rather valuing and celebrating them.
Precisely. For example, Standpoint Feminism argues that women, due to their historical marginalization, often have a deeper understanding of issues like power oppression and social justice. They bring a unique perspective to the table that shouldn't be ignored.
This is where things start to get really intriguing. So it's not just about legal equality. It's also about recognizing the value of different ways of thinking and being in the world.
Exactly. And this distinction is crucial when analyzing international relations. Think about conflict resolution, for instance. If you only value traditionally masculine approaches to negotiation, you might miss out on the insights and strategies that women with their different experiences and perspectives can bring to the table.
That's a really powerful point. It seems like understanding these different feminist approaches can give you a much richer understanding of the complexities of global politics.
And it's not just about understanding the past. It's about shaping the future as we move into the later waves of feminism. We'll see how these debates continue to evolve and influence everything from international development policies to humanitarian interventions.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot, but it looks like there's a lot more to cover.
There is.
So we covered the first two waves and this crucial debate about equality versus difference. What I'm finding fascinating is how these ideas weren't just confined to academic circles. They spilled over into real-world, action-shaping policies and movements on a global scale.
And that's exactly what makes studying feminist theory so relevant for you UPSC aspirants. You know, it's not just about abstract ideas, it's about understanding the forces that shape our world. And as we move into the later waves of feminism, things get even more nuanced and, dare I say, exciting.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Where do we go from here?
Well, the text then introduces us to postcolonial feminism, which really challenges the idea of a universal woman's experience. You know, a lot of early feminist thought was developed in Western countries, often by white middle-class women.
So postcolonial feminism is about bringing in those voices and perspectives that were previously excluded from the conversation.
Exactly. They critique the idea that Western feminist ideals should be applied universally. Arguing that they often fail to account for the unique challenges faced by women in countries with histories of colonization. They're also critical of those white savior narratives that often dominate international development efforts.
Can you give me an example of how this plays out, like in a real-world scenario?
Imagine a development project aimed at empowering women in a rural community in Africa. A well-intentioned Western organization might come in with preconceived notions about what these women need without truly understanding their specific cultural context or the power dynamics at play within their own communities.
So it's about recognizing agency and ensuring that solutions are driven by the women themselves. Not imposed from the outside.
Precisely. Post-colonial feminism emphasizes the importance of listening to the voices of those who have been marginalized and letting them lead the way in shaping their own futures. And this ties in with the text exploration of poststructural feminism, which takes this critique of universal truths even further.
I remember poststructuralism being a bit of a mind bender back in my college days. How does it apply to feminism?
Poststructural feminism questions the very categories we use to understand gender. It challenges the idea that there are fixed, essential differences between men and women, arguing that even those categories are socially constructed.
So it's not about denying that biological differences exist, but rather understanding how our perceptions of those differences are shaped by cultural language and power structures.
Exactly. They argue that even our understanding of biology is filtered through a social lens.
Okay.
For example, the way we talk about men being naturally more aggressive or women being more nurturing.
Right.
Those are not necessarily biological truths. They're stories we tell ourselves based on societal expectations.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about gender. But how does this relate to international relations?
It challenges us to question the assumptions that underpin international policies and norms.
Okay.
For instance, many international organizations are structured around traditional notions of gender roles.
Right.
Poststructural feminism encourages us to deconstruct those norms and consider alternative ways of organizing and governing that might be more inclusive and equitable.
So instead of accepting the status quo, we need to constantly question the power dynamics at play.
Yes.
And challenge those taken for granted categories that often lead to exclusion and inequality.
That's a brilliant way to put it, and that's precisely the kind of critical thinking that's going to set you apart as a UPSC aspirant.
Right.
Understanding these different feminist perspectives isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about developing a lens through which to view the world.
Right.
A lens that allows you to see the complexities and challenge the assumptions that often go unnoticed.
This is all incredibly insightful.
Good.
But I can imagine it feeling a bit overwhelming. For someone just starting to explore these ideas.
Sure.
It's a lot to unpack.
It definitely is. But that's where the beauty of this text lies.
Okay.
It provides a framework for understanding the evolution of feminist thought and its impact on global politics. It gives you the tools to analyze real-world situations and develop your own informed opinions.
So it's not about finding the right answer, but rather engaging in a thoughtful and critical examination of these complex issues.
Exactly. And that's what makes studying international relations so fascinating.
Right.
There are rarely easy answers. But by grappling with these different perspectives, you develop a nuanced understanding of the challenges we face and the potential solutions that exist.
I'm starting to see how mastering these concepts could be a real game changer for someone preparing for the UPSC exams.
Definitely.
It's about going beyond rote memorization and developing that deeper level of critical thinking.
Absolutely. And it's not just about acing an exam. It's about equipping yourself with the knowledge and skills to become a thoughtful and engaged citizen of the world.
I completely agree. So where do we go from here? How do we take all this knowledge and apply it to the real world?
Well, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
The text provides a foundation. But it's up to each individual to take those insights and apply them to their own lives, their careers, and their engagement with the world.
That's a great segue into our final thoughts for this deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground from the early waves of feminism to those more radical and challenging perspectives that are shaping the conversation today.
And along the way, we've seen how these ideas have moved beyond the realm of theory to influence policies, movements, and even the very structures of international organizations. It's a testament to the power of ideas to shape the world we live in.
Okay, so for all of you listening, especially those gearing up for those UPSC exams, this deep dive has hopefully given you a solid grasp of how feminist thought has evolved and its relevance to international relations.
It has.
It's about equipping yourselves with the knowledge and the critical thinking skills to analyze complex global issues and hopefully contribute to creating a more just and equitable world. And remember, this deep dive is just a starting point. The real learning begins when you start applying these concepts to real-world situations, to the news you read, the policies you analyze, the discussions you have.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that the conversation about feminism is ongoing. Constantly evolving, new voices are emerging, new challenges are arising, and the interplay between local and global perspectives is becoming increasingly important.
So how can our listeners, particularly those aspiring diplomats and policymakers, keep up with these evolving conversations and ensure they're incorporating diverse feminist perspectives into their work?
Well, first and foremost, stay curious. Read, widely engage with different viewpoints. And don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions. Attend conferences and seminars. Follow feminist scholars and activists on social media. And seek out opportunities to learn from those with lived experiences different from your own.
And for those of you prepping for the UPSC, think about how these different feminist perspectives might influence your approach to essay questions. Or current affairs analysis. How might understanding postcolonial feminism, for example, shape your understanding of a conflict in a former colony?
Exactly.
Or how might considering the equality versus difference debate inform your views on international development policies?
It's about weaving those threads of knowledge into your analysis, demonstrating that you can think critically and engage with diverse perspectives. It's that kind of intellectual depth that will make your answer stand out.
This has been such an insightful deep dive, and I really appreciate your expertise.
Well, thank you.
It's amazing how much ground we've covered, from the historical roots of feminism to its impact on contemporary global politics.
And hopefully we've inspired our listeners to continue exploring these ideas, to keep asking questions, and to use their knowledge to make a positive impact on the world.
If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends.
Yes.
And be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep those minds engaged and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge.